What's going on, guys? Behind me I have this project. We've been working on it for a while, but it has changed plans and for the better. So right here we've got a BGE block and we are going to be putting it into this Dodge Dakota. If you guys remember this car, or truck I should say, it went for paint. It was originally burgundy. Now it's got a complete color change. We stripped it down. Originally it was going to be a 392 8-speed truck, but now it's getting a 426 3-liter Whipple blown HEMI. So we stripped it down to nothing, sent it off for paint, and it came back. I know somebody's going to comment, so I'm just going to tell you guys now, I am going to be pulling the cab off and we're going to be painting the frame. We didn't bother with it when it went there because it was going to get overspray on it anyways, but we will be just pulling the body off, painting the frame so everything looks clean in here. But check that out, you guys. Complete color change in here. It's going to look really, really good, even all the underside of the hood as well. We'll get more into, the body and aesthetics in this thing. In this video, we are going to be assembling this short block. So this is a brand new BGE block from MMX. They sell them already kind of ready to go. So it has been decked. They cleaned up the surfaces where our heads go. Not only that, but they line board it for the ARPs. So it has ARPs in it and they line board it out. So it's pretty much ready to go. And then over here, this is all MMX's kit as well. So it's a 426 stroker kit. We've got a Manley crank, Manley rods. We've got MMX's coated bearings for our rod bearings. We've also got their main bearings and Molly forged pistons for this whole setup. So we're gonna start assembling this short block. Heads are also CNC ported by MMX, but they're at the machine shop right now just going through them. They're decking them after they came back from MMX with the port job. If you guys haven't seen our 6.2 fully built engine we did on that Challenger over there, we also have that video if you guys are just doing a 6.2 built engine. So we did that one already. Now we're going to do the 426 stroker build for you guys, right from a bare block to a complete short block. Okay, so the main caps are all removed, and if you guys are wondering the sequence of stuff here, they are all numbered and they all have arrows that face the front of the engine. So here it is, 1, 2, 3 doesn't have a number, but it is right there, the arrow, and then we got 4 and 5. So there they are. I took off our ARP hardware. If you're using OEM bolts, I don't know why you would if you're going this crazy of an engine, but anyways, they're all removed. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna load in our race bearings here. So we'll load these in, and then we can get to putting this crank in here and checking our bearing clearances. So essentially what we have to do is put the bearings in. You can do it two ways. If you have a dial bore gauge, you can use that way. I'm gonna show you the plastic gauge method, but what we're gonna do is put the bearings in, install our crank, torque everything down to spec with the ARP assembly lube, and then we will check what our plastic gauge shows, and then we should be in spec. These kits are all pretty much drop in, ready to go. So it's the one nice thing about getting this stuff from MMX is they all package everything so you don't have to mess with too much stuff, but we'll just still verify it and then we'll go from there. So this goes without saying, make sure all your surfaces are clean. That bag over there has been on this, so anytime I'm not working on it, the bag goes back on. Also, Mr. Gasket makes engine bags as well. If you guys need an engine cover bag, I'll link it down below where you can get a Mr. Gasket engine cover bag. They're large, they fit right over. You don't have to try to get a garbage bag around everything. It's made to fit this specific use. But here's our bearings. You'll notice that these ones have the holes in the bottom. You have to make sure you put the ones with the holes in the bottom because these are your oil galleys. This is where your main bearings get supplied oil to actually lubricate them. So the ones with the holes go on the block side, and then these ones here, the ones with no holes, they go on your caps. So we got those. If you guys haven't put these in before, you probably shouldn't even be messing with the engine. Well, I shouldn't say that. It might be your first time, but there's this tab here. So see the tab? When you flip this over, you're going to see the tab. So you line it up there, and as long as you're putting the solid ones on your caps, and then the ones with the holes on your block side, same thing, little tab lines up in there. And I'm going to install these on our caps, and then we can take out the crank and we're going to put it in here, and I'll show you guys that process as well. All right, so I laid the crank in here, and then what I've done right now is cut myself 5 different pieces of plastic gauge. So it's very odd stuff if you haven't seen it before. It comes in this, and then you cut it to length, and inside it almost looks like dental floss. You cut it, and then
you cut it with the paper like this, and then what we're gonna do is unravel this, and a little piece of dental floss is gonna appear. And then what we're gonna do is lay a little strip on the top of each surface here, and then we're gonna put our caps in. We're gonna put our ARP assembly lube on here, torque everything in the proper sequence to spec, and then we're gonna remove everything again, and then we're gonna see how much this little piece of, I keep calling it dental floss, you can probably see it right there, how much it's expanded. And then on the actual pieces of paper it shows you, so you can see the different, depending on how much it squishes, you measure it against here, and that will give us our clearance. So the more it squishes, the smaller the clearance. The less it squishes, the more the clearance. So it's pretty interesting stuff, but that's what it is. Let's go ahead and do it. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see this, but see that little green line right there? I've got it laid about on the top of every main. So I got them all in there. Now I'm gonna go ahead and put my caps in here. Like I said, we're gonna put the ARP assembly lube, torque everything to spec in the right sequence, and then we can remove it, and we'll see how wide this little string squishes out to.
All right, so it's a few days later. Things probably look a little different because we're just working on 5 million things, upgrading to a stage 2 inner chiller on our Hellcats. But I popped the crank out here. I just set it down back in the original box for a second, cleaned off all the plastic gauge. We're good to go on our mains. And what I also did off camera, but you guys didn't miss anything, we're running block off plates for the oil jet squirters. So I had to buy those from MMX, and it comes with the hardware. So got those all in there, torqued them. I put Loctite on those bolts because I don't want those ever thinking about coming loose. So our mains are in. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do is I'm gonna start putting assembly lube on all the stuff. So I'm gonna put assembly lube on here, and then I'm actually gonna install the crank, and the crank shouldn't have to come out for any reason. And with the crank in place, then I can start doing all the clearances on my rods. Then I'm gonna have, you know, the crank fixed in place, and I'll be able to check all my rod bearing clearances as well. So let's get that in there. We'll torque that down, and that's one less thing to worry about. Also, just before I do that, if you guys do or don't know, or I have not mentioned it yet, so there is the thrust bearings. So they go in here. You can't mix them up because there's different size tabs on each one. So this one's got the little shorter one here. This one's got the little longer one. You'll see when I put them in. I'll show you guys once we get the crank in. I put the crank in first, and I slide in those after. All right, so crank is in, and we put assembly lube on the bearings, put a little bit on the actual crank itself. And then here is our thrust bearings. So this is the way I install them, is I shove the crank to one side, shove it to the other side, and then the slotted side, so these little oil reliefs here, those go against your crank. And then you're gonna rotate them like this in. So I get this one in here. Again, make sure that the relief side is against the crank, so you can see the little slots are right there. We're gonna rotate this down. That's gonna sit right there. And then we're gonna just push the crank towards the back of the engine in this case. So if I can do this with one hand here. Doesn't take much. There we go. And then this one, same deal. Let's give it a little wipe here. This is gonna go right in here. And we're gonna rotate this one into place as well. Boom, just like that. So there it is. Like I said, this one has the little bit longer tab. This one has the shorter tab. You can kind of see based on the machining that's how far deep into the cap area it goes. So this one doesn't go quite as far, whereas the machining on this one goes right into the end of the cap. So that's how you can tell which one is which. So that's in there. Now I'm going to put assembly lube on my bearing caps. We can put all the caps in place,
and then we can get all these torque down. We can also put in our side bolts. So these are all ARP as well. One thing on the side bolts is you do want to put some RTV on these, because these can leak a little bit of oil. So you want to put some RTV on them to make sure that they're going to seal. You're not going to have a little oil leak out of the side here. Alright, so we got our rods laid out, and we went ahead and measured all of our bearings. So the bearings are installed. We use a dial bore gauge. If you guys don't know how to use a dial bore gauge, I'll link one down below, but you kind of want to spend a little bit of money on this. This one's an okay one, but I do actually want to get a better one. So not only am I checking with the dial bore gauge, but I'm also going to check it with plastic gauge. So once we install the pistons and install the pistons into the bore, and we put our connecting rods on, everything's checking out in spec with our dial bore, but I'm also going to put plastic gauge underneath the cap when we install them, and just double, triple check. You're never going to be able to access this stuff, so I like to do it as many times as possible. What I'm doing here right now is I'm filing the rings. So I have my last second compression ring, so they're labeled here. You'll see here 1, 2, and 3. And this is kind of my dirty bench, because you know we're literally making filings right here, so it doesn't matter too much about the cleanliness aspect. You're gonna have to clean everything anyways. So this is my second compression ring, and what we're doing is we're filing down, and I showed you guys in the other video where we built the 6.2 for our Hellcat over there. Same exact principle. So you're gonna see a letter stamped on the top for the top. So M for Molly, they just put their M on the top for stamping it. But we're gonna end up taking a little bit out of one side. You don't wanna file both sides, because then you gotta clean up both sides and deburr both sides. But I also have this ring filing tool here, so I'll link this down below for you guys. Essentially, you put it here, and you wanna cut into the ring. You don't wanna cut out. So you'll notice if I were to cut this, if I was gonna cut the ring right there, if you're cutting out, you're gonna pull burrs out, and then you're going to mar this sealing surface here. Versus if you cut in towards the ring, you're pulling this way, so you're not going to have and risk chipping the outside, because you're going to be pulling into it instead of pulling out. The same way if you cut a piece of wood, and depending on which way you have the blade spinning, you know, one side's going to be clean, one side's going to be not. Similar principle on this metal. So what I'm going to do here is, a lot of guys will count the turns, you know, how many turns, and then they'll go back and you can kind of get an idea on how many. So I have all the rings. I'm form fitting the rings per cylinder. So you can see here I've got my top and second compression ring on each one. Those are all respective to each bore. Then I'm using one of our new pistons. You can use an old piston, but as long as you don't do something silly like drop it, then you can use any piston. But I'm using the piston to square it up in the bore and check the ring end gap. So these ones are all good. I'm setting these, since we're going boost, they're gonna be all set to 28 thou. If you're gonna go NA, you can tighten that up, but again, depends what your goals are. So I've got my other top compression ring here, and I'm working on my second compression ring. So I'm just gonna continue to file it out in the fashion that I told you guys. Then you take your feeler gauge, in this case 28 thou, check your ring end gap after you square up the ring in the bore, make sure you're good, move on to the next. So I'm doing that. It's very time consuming, but it's got to be done, and I'm doing it. Okay, so right now I'm just working the C-clips or circlips on one side of the piston. So I start by working it around, and then the last portion I put the screwdriver in right there, just a little jewelers, and I work it over. So let me show you that. Hopefully you guys can see it there. There it is there. And you want the gap to be at the bottom. You don't want the gap to be at the side, because in theory, if you leave the opening on either the side, then it could compress with it traveling, with the piston traveling up and down. So the theory is to put your opening at the bottom so that it can't compress as this is moving up and down. So I'm just about got it in, so I'm gonna use this. So I'm gonna use my screwdriver and just work it in, and there we go. The opening is at the bottom right there. There it is. opening is at the bottom and this C-clip is installed. So I'm just going through all the pistons. Then I'm going to install my wrist pins on my rods with assembly lube and put the other C-clip in. Okay, we're going to install one of these circlips. I'm going to show you guys how I work it. So I start off on the opposite side of the little tang because that's where I'm going to use the little opening there to get my final leverage. So I put it in, tucked it in there, and then it gets a little fun, and it depends on the pistons you use, but you're going to get your little screwdriver in here. You're going to pry it over. I go like that, and then I use my thumb to hold it. Then I put it in this little tang thing and work this last little bit. And there you go. You'll hear it click. Double check that it's fully seated, and you're good to go.
All right, so all of our pistons are on, our C-clips, circlips are all installed. And what I just did was put on all of our ring sets and I matched them accordingly. So when I ground them down in the bore, each respective ring gap set went to the appropriate pistons. I labeled my pistons with the appropriate cylinder number, and now we're ready to go. They do have a specific order or orientation, I should say, of your rings. So just follow the instructions. You can see there, bottom oil ring gap, top oil ring gap, your expander gap range for your oil ring, and then your second ring and your top ring where each one goes. So they go in different positions so that we don't get any leakage, and they're all on there ready to go. One other thing too is you do need to remember to file down the end of your ring or just knock off any burrs. So I just use a little bit of emery cloth on the edge there, cleaned everything, ready to go. So now what I just finished doing, I didn't bore you guys with that stuff, but what I did was I cleaned up all the cylinders. So I just wiped them down as much as I could until the blue cloth started just coming back clean. So just a little bit of WD-40 and cleaning it until it's absolutely spotless. And then I will show you guys here. So one of the benefits, if I haven't already said this, about getting one of these blocks from MMX is with the 426 kit, you don't have to clearance the block. They've already done it for us. So you'll notice in the bottom corner right there, that chunk, they've already notched each cylinder right there for the clearance of the rod. So when the rod comes around, the big end of the rod, you can see there they've clearanced the bottom of these cylinders. So they took out that big chunk. So if you note that there, you'll have to do that if you're just going to buy the 426 kit and your block isn't, of course, already machined. You'll have to notch the bottom of each cylinder for the big end of the rod when it whips around. So I'll show you guys how close it's going to be. We'll have plenty of clearance, but you'll be able to see where it gets close to the cylinder and where you would have to do that as well. So what I'm going to do now is start dropping these pistons in. And even though we checked, this is, in my opinion, you can't check enough. I'm sure you could probably check too much, but what I'm going to do, even though we checked with our dial bore gauge, you know, maybe your dial bore gauge isn't, you know, the most expensive one, because some of these things can be like $400 or $500. I'm also going to double check with plastic gauge. So once we put it in and I tighten down my rods, I'm going to put plastic gauge underneath there before I do the final assembly. Take it back off, just double, triple check, make sure we're good on all of them, and then yeah, from there we should be good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lubricate this with assembly lube. That's a big controversy whether you guys do or don't. I like to do it. It's going to burn off instantly anyways, but just assures that while we're assembling the rest of the vehicle that we're not going to have you know, any condensation issues, any lubrication issues, because when this thing starts up, you know, we want to make sure that it's lubricated until the oil starts feeding all through the different galleys and whatnot. Even though we're going to prime it, it's just that extra step. I'll also link this down below for you guys, but this is just, it's worth the money, you guys. So this just sits in here beautifully like that, and you just slide the pistons in. So I'll link this down below. I mean, you can use generic ones, universal ones, but this is just a perfect fit, and it just makes things a lot easier because it's got a little lip here to hold it in the actual cylinder as you're dropping it down. All right, guys, so I got some assembly lube, so I'm just gonna kind of drizzle it around on the rings. Again, some people will argue this to the end, but my last engine just made almost 1,000 wheel horsepower, and it's running beautifully, so. This is all going to get dissipated almost instantly, but it just helps. So I'm going to put on all the rings here, and then again, make sure your rings don't slide around too much from the actual position.
The other thing too is putting some assembly lube on here. It definitely helps to slide it through our installing tool. It just makes it a little bit easier. Also, double check all your C-clips. Like, just double, triple check everything, you guys. This is the last time you get to see this stuff for a long time, hopefully. Also, I'm going to put some assembly lube here, just on our upper rod bearing, because I don't necessarily need to get to that, so that's not going to be removed. So we'll put some there. And then we're pretty much ready to install this. So let me get everything rigged up here. So we'll put it in our tool like this. And if you guys, I already did this on the Hellcat build, but I feel like I went way more in depth on that one. But yeah, if you guys want a little bit more detail, just head over to that one. I'll link it here above for you guys at the same time if you guys are just doing a simple Hellcat deal. So squeeze all your rings. It's a little bit of a juggle here, but that's why having the right size tool helps, because you're also not fiddling with the tools. You kind of have enough going on, in my opinion. But we're gonna go ahead, get these situated. There we go. You can see everything's going in nice. And you shouldn't have to force this, you guys. If you're finding you have to force something, something's probably not right. See a lot of guys like beating on this stuff, but like you saw, I just literally put it in nicely like that. So we're gonna slide this in. Depending on where your crank's at, you might have to position it on your crank, but I think we're kind of low in the stroke right now, so yeah, I don't think we're gonna have an issue there. Literally, I can just push this in with my thumbs. And that's it, she's in. So that's how easy it should go in when you guys do it nicely. You shouldn't be having it, like I have this hammer on standby, but really you shouldn't even need it. And if anything, I was just gonna use it as a light tap, but yeah, you saw I just threw it in with my thumbs. So I'm gonna go ahead, do the other ones. We'll kind of get them sitting on the crank, and then we'll flip it over and we'll check everything with the plastic gauge. So the bottom rotating assembly is good to go. What I'm gonna do now is we're gonna put in MMX's cam, we'll put in our lifters, and then we're gonna get the heads on with the push rods. So we also have in the back here, we sent out our heads and they are ready to go. So we went ahead, sent them out to MMX. They got CNC ported, and then they are fresh in the bag from the machine shop. They went ahead, did a valve job on it, put in our upgraded springs, our retainers, and everything is literally clean and ready to bolt on. So those are there in the bag. So let's go ahead, start off, get this camshaft lubed up, get it in there. I gotta get some of the other stuff on here. We still have to put our keyways on. We gotta get our oil pump on here. We're putting a brand new Hellcat oil pump on here. Bunch of stuff, let's just get into it. All right, so if you guys ever get a brand new block, it comes absolutely empty. So we've got no MDS solenoids, no MDS plugs, so we'll have to put those in. Also, there is a hardware kit that you'll need to get. So most of it you can see is used up, but I still need to put in all the dowels and whatnot for the transmission, the timing cover, all that stuff. And then you also have to put in all of your plugs. So rear cam seal, those plugs, like all the plugs have to get installed as well. So I've got a bunch of parts laid out here. So we've got our MMX blower cam. So this is for a twin screw blower, and then brand new cam bolt. We've got new timing chain tensioner, new guide, new timing chain. So here's our cam gear. We've got to install an 8-degree limiter in it. So we'll do that. We got MDS delete plugs and a few other things. I also have to reinstall our VVT solenoid in the front also. So let's go ahead. If you guys have never seen the instructions for this on how to install your phaser limiter, I'll link that here above or check in the description, because I'm just going to whip through it, get it done. I've already showed it multiple times in other videos, so I'm just going to get it done. All right, so I went ahead and I put in our MDS plugs, also put in our VVT solenoid. Now let's get the cam in there. And you guys didn't miss much, but I put the keyways in here, put our lower timing gear, and also the spacer that comes supplied with the MMX kit. So everything is there, and let's go ahead and put the cam in. All right, so we got our timing set all up on here. Now I'm gonna go ahead and put brand new non-MDS lifters in here. So we'll go ahead, get those situated, tighten those down, then we can move on. All right, so we got our Cometic head gaskets on here. And if you guys ever do this, just make sure you have them on the right way. So you'll see R, so it's stamped on the top, R for right. The engine sits like this in the chassis, so right, left. You'll see over here, stamped L for left. Then we've got all our surfaces clean, oil-free. Here is our heads. Again, they are CNC ported. I don't know if you guys can see that. The GoPro doesn't do a great job picking everything up, but CNC ported from MMX. You can see all the little lines there from the CNC machine. So these flow better than factory. It's the same ones that I have on my Hellcat. Mine are also CNC ported from MMX. So let's go over here, bring it over to here, and then we've got our ARP fasteners. So we're gonna put ARP head studs. So this thing is gonna be bolted down with better fasteners. Let's get it on here, get this done. Okay, so heads are installed, you guys. ARP fasteners are in there, torqued down to spec. There's a whole specific sequence with the ARP assembly lube. If you guys have never done it, you have to do it in a certain sequence. So went in the correct pattern, went around a million times with the correct torque patterns. They have you go up from like 30 foot-pounds to 60 foot-pounds, and then the ultimate and final 105 foot-pounds. So it's kind of fun doing it on an engine stand. You kind of have to brace the engine stand and make sure you're not chasing around. And then these top ones are last, but there's not much torque on those. I think it's like 25 foot-pounds on the top, guys. So what we're gonna do now is, I'm still waiting on a few parts, but I am gonna put in the push rods just so we're ready to go. And then we'll be moving on to the next stuff, but let's go ahead and get these in. And just before I put them in, these are not your standard push rods. They are MMX specified, so they're definitely an upgraded part over the factory ones. You can see there. All right. I've got this brand new Mopar rear main seal. So we're gonna put a brand new rear main seal on it, because last thing you wanna be doing is putting a used one on this at this point. Brand new crank, brand new everything. So we're gonna get this on. It actually comes with the seal. So obviously this is the rear main seal portion, and then it comes with the rubber gasket around the edge. So this plate comes all ready to go. So go ahead, install our bolts, put this on. We don't RTV the actual cover to the block, but once we put our oil pan on, we put RTV around this section here where it transitions from this cover to the actual block. So ended up getting that new seal on the back. So our new rear main seal is on with the housing. Ended up putting our flex plate on. And then our timing set is all set up here. So let me show you guys that real quick, because it's a little bit confusing if you haven't done it for the first time. So our number one is at TDC. I just got this welding rod in there that you can check where the piston is. And then right here, you're gonna see, hopefully you can see on this camera, but there is the two marks on the timing chain, and then there's the mark on the timing gear right there. So these two straddle that, and then on the bottom, you would think that this one would be perfectly at the bottom, but it never is. So there's the mark here on the chain, and then there's the indent on our lower gear. So that's all lined up, so everything is in time, and we're good there. So what I'm gonna do next is put in our rocker assemblies. So I'm gonna lift these off. These are just sitting here. I got our push rods in there ready to go. We're gonna put in our rocker assemblies, get everything tightened down. Then our long block is pretty much complete. And then what I wanna do afterwards is I do wanna get to the oil pan and the windage tray, which we'll show you guys in just a second. I was gonna use an OEM style pan, but I might end up using the Holley one, because we know the Holley one will fit, but I might have to modify the windage tray for this stroker kit. So we'll get to that in just a second, but let's get the rockers on. All right, so our rocker arm assemblies are on, tightened, torqued. If you guys have never done this, the exhaust side is pretty easy, well, in my opinion, because you can see the push rod and that it's seated into the cup on the actual rocker. A lot of people end up missing an intake or end up messing up on an intake because you can't really see the push rod. But the easiest way is to stick your finger here and make sure you can feel that the push rod is fully seated into that cup of your rocker, because you can't see it when you're looking at it from the top, but if you stick your finger down there, you'll be able to feel it. And then when you're tightening these down, start from the middle and work your way outside, because when this engine is set to time, it doesn't actually even matter where you are in the position of the crank or the cam. There's going to be some valves that are open, and you don't want to sit there and just send it to the moon on one of them, because you'll end up putting a ton of stress on this. So you have to work your way evenly so that you're pulling these down in an even fashion, because like I said, you're going to be, especially with upgraded springs and valve train where these are stiffer than stock, you really have to move around quite a bit and pull these down evenly. A lot of guys will strip these out on the head, or even, you know, break this or crack this. I don't know how they're doing it. Well, I do know how they're doing it, but they're just being careless with it. So just take your time on this part. If you guys don't know, I is on the intake side. Exhaust, sometimes I've seen them with an E on them, but either way, the ones that don't have a stamp is for exhausts. I is marked for intake. So that's there. They're both on. I'm gonna put some assembly lube just on our rocker assemblies, and then I'm gonna put these valve covers on, and we should be good to go. We shouldn't have to take this off. All right, valve covers are on. I don't know if I mentioned, but I ended up putting on the Hooker Blackheart engine mount, so that's all ready to go too. I'm gonna put some tape on here until we're actually ready to install it. And then I'm also gonna rotate it and start checking for clearance on the windage tray on the Holly pan and see how that goes. All right, so here's the factory windage tray for a stock oil pan, and you can see just how close everything gets. And then you can see here where it's been relieved so that the big ends of the rods can clear through here and whatnot. So, and a lot of this stuff has been cut out through here. But when I put the Holly one on there, I don't know if you guys can see that, it is very tight in there. The Holly one has much more clearance. I don't think I have to do anything at all. So you can see this Holly one, it's mostly encased. So if I put this one over top, in the general vicinity of where this needs to go, we've got boatloads of clearance, it looks like. So I'm gonna double check some stuff, but I think we should be okay. Thankfully, I'm gonna continue to rotate it and make sure everything clears. All right, guys, so if you keep seeing that I'm wearing different clothes, it's because we're doing this over a course of days and waiting for certain parts to arrive. So right now, I've got a bunch of parts ready to go. We've got our front timing cover. We need to put a new gasket on the back and also a new front seal. We've got our Holly oil pan over there. I wasn't sure if it was gonna work or we were gonna have to do something factory, because with this being a 426 stroker, there is quite a bit more swing on the big ends of the rods. So ended up getting the windage tray from the Holly pan, and also Holly specs out that it will clear. So they have a spec on their website, and I went ahead, just kind of loosely put the windage tray in place, rotated everything, and everything actually clears. So I'm really happy about that. We've got a new timing set on here. If you're wondering, the engine is, yes, upside down right now while I work on the bottom half of it. And we're gonna put a brand new oil pump on it. So we've got a brand new Mopar in the box Hellcat oil pump. Also, I went ahead and ordered an ATI dampener for a few reasons. One, this crank is actually keyed, so with it being an aftermarket Manly crank, it comes with the key. Otherwise, you would take this out, and if we were to install a factory front dampener, we would have had to drill into this crank and pin it, and it's just a lot nicer just to go ATI. So we went with an ATI pulley. It's already keyed, it's gonna fit on the keyway. We can put that on. But first things first, let's get this oil pump on here, then we can get our pickup tube on here. We can start getting this thing all buttoned up and just one step closer. All right, so here's our brand new OEM Mopar oil pump. It's definitely a good idea just to replace these things when you're doing all this stuff, you guys. So there she is. Let's get this bolted on. Okay, so oil pump is on. Our 4 bolts are torqued down, and I know somebody's gonna say something in the comments, because everybody likes to be a smartass. Yes, this engine gets bagged every single time we're not working on it. I might start the videos with it just looking like it's sitting here uncovered, but I promise you this thing would be absolutely filthy if we just left it sitting here. So yes, we bag it every time we're not working on it to keep everything clean while the engine is open like this. So now I'm gonna get my pickup tube, install it here. Since it's an ARP fastener, we do have to set our height on this, so it's not like a set height. So we're gonna have to put the nut on here, and then you know, set the height for the pickup tube on the back on that support there. But let me get that all in there. I'll show you guys what it looks like. All right, pickup tube is on, and like I mentioned, we have to set this height, so that looks like where it should be. This is all torqued down. These are all 21 foot-pounds on these 13 mil head bolts on the oil pump and on the pickup tube. And then here, there's, like I said, the ARP nut. We're essentially gonna double nut that in place, and that's just the way the ARP setup is. What we do have to do though, is if you guys watch my video on this, where I had a leaking oil pan gasket, see how massive these ARP fasteners are? We actually have to clearance part of the pan. So right here, we have to notch this out. Otherwise it will dig in and actually cause the back of the oil pan to not seal. So I'm gonna have to do a little bit of Dremel work here, notch this out. That way it clears those ARPs and we'll test fit. All right, so we just got the oil pan on here and you guys can clearly see just how much it hangs it up. So what happens is right now it's sitting on those ARPs with our bolt holes pretty much aligned. Maybe a little bit forward, but as we slide this back, so right now the holes are pretty much aligned, but it's hanging up right there. And then if I slide this back, it will end up dropping down. But look at how off the holes are. They're like off a good 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little bit more. Maybe you guys can see that indication a little more. So holes are off. We got to modify this pan, and I'll show you guys when I get done. Okay, so while it was sitting up high, I kind of just gave the oil pan a couple taps just with a rubber mallet, and you can see right there, like I said, it didn't go crazy, but just enough to kind of just give us a little bit of witness marks. So I'm gonna try to take out this, but one of the things is you can't take a lot because there's a relief here, so you can't go too crazy with it, but we're gonna grind these down until we get the adequate clearance. All right, so we're just working at trimming this back. That's what it used to look like, this big bump. Now it's recessed, so I'm gonna do the same to this one, and I have to clean the pan, test fit it, probably do this multiple times until I get it just right to where it is enough clearance. All right, so after grinding, cleaning out, and washing the pan, now everything fits, you guys. So I can actually move the pan around a little bit. I don't know if you guys can see our bolt holes, but they are perfectly lined up. We can kind of shift it around here. All the holes are lined up, and our pan is sitting down flush at the back. The other way I can check too is if I slide the pan forward, I can actually slide it forward just a hair and see where it's making contact with those studs, and I can actually move it just slightly forward of the bolt holes. So we are good to go, you guys. So I'm gonna take this off. I still gotta put in the baffle that's in the bottom because I had that out so I can clean it properly, and then we'll move on to the next part of putting our timing cover on here as well. All right, you guys already know how I do. I cannot just put something crusty on such a nice and shiny engine with everything looking so clean. I had to freshen up the timing cover, so I ended up painting it just this bright silver color because it was just kind of old and crusty looking. Right here is where the water pump goes, so I didn't want to paint over that, of course. But popped out the seals. So here's a brand new Mopar seal that goes for our crank. I'm gonna pop this in, and then we'll put in a brand new seal on the back side here too. Okay, brand new seals in here. Now let's put the brand new timing cover seal on here. All right, new gaskets all in place. Let's go ahead, get the cover on the engine. Trying to do that as fast as possible because I just finished taking the ATI out of a boiling pot of water because they are a press fit and they are an absolute bugger to get on if you guys have never put one on. So I was just trying to do it as fast as possible because I came running out with gloves and took it out, and then I had to lubricate it, slide it on there, and now it's fully seated onto the keyway here. So gonna double check it, but we should be good to go. All right, got that on there, you guys. Those are sometimes not fun to put on. The one that I put on my Hellcat was an absolute bugger to get on, but it's fully seated down. You'll usually see the crank is a little bit lower than the face, but this thing is still super hot. I highly recommend, if you ever do this, to heat this up. It even says so on the instructions, but anyways, what we will have to do is clean this off. So I'm gonna spray brake clean this off, and then we're gonna put RTV here because you wanna seal off the end of your keyway. Otherwise, you run the risk of when you actually install the bolts and whatnot, that oil from the engine can actually seep out through the keyway there. So we definitely want
that to be sealed off 100%. So we'll clean this off, get some RTV in there, put the bolt in, and we'll also get our nice dampener on there. I'm really excited to get that on there because it's gonna look really, really good. All right, ATI dampener is on here. That thing looks really, really good. Whole engine's looking really good with just everything looking so fresh and clean. So what I'm gonna do right now is we're gonna put our oil pan on here, our pickup tube, everything is fastened, torqued, good to go. We do have to put RTV in the 4 corners, so here, 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 and here. So I'm gonna put the RTV there. Also, on this Holley oil pan, since it's kind of like a rope style gasket, there is a joint right there. They did put like some glue on it, I guess, but I'm still gonna put a dab of RTV where that joint is, just so that we don't have any leaks. And also, whoever was working on this before installed the plugs, but did not put any thread sealant on them whatsoever. So I'm also gonna do that, put some thread sealant on them, go figure. Woo! All right, pan is on. It's looking good, you guys. So like I said, I just took this out. There was oil all the way to the end of it. So whoever was working on this truck previously and installed this pan on the original 392, look at that. No thread sealant on these. So that's part of the leak that we were experiencing. If you guys have been following along on this build for a while, this this oil pan was on the 392 before, and it was leaking like all over the place. So yep, let me seal that up. We got Permatex high temp thread sealant that we're putting on this. Here's the stuff I use if you guys are curious. I'll link it down in the description below for you guys. So this stuff works awesome. I use it on a bunch of my parts, and just clean these off with brake clean just so that we're applying it to a oil-free surface. All right, so we got a nice line of sealant right there. And if you guys are wondering what these are, like, you're gonna say like, hey, why are these even in here? What do they do? Holley puts them in there so that if you want to potentially run a turbo setup, you have a drain port right here, so you don't have to tap your oil pan. You can literally just put your turbo drain, and if you're going to do twin turbos, you got your drain lines for each side. It's a pretty cool feature, but obviously we're not doing that, so we're just plugging them. All right, guys, well, the engine's back together. I'm gonna stick to the format that the other YouTubers that make automotive content get, where things just happen and go together magically, and then they come together like this. So the 426 is together. If you guys wanna see more in-depth content, you guys need to start giving these videos a thumbs up, sharing them with other people that need to see this stuff, because it takes a long time to make these videos for you guys just to only get 1,500 or 2,000 views on them. So if you guys want to see more in-depth content like some of the past stuff, you guys are going to have to start picking up the slack on your end and sharing the videos, posting them, sharing them on forums, wherever you think they are helpful. But the engine's together. We got the ATI dampener on there. We've got our Holley oil pan on there. Our coil packs are in. Our spark plugs are in. Everything's together, ready to go. The only thing we don't have on it is the supercharger. So maybe I should snap my fingers and the supercharger will miraculously arrive on it. But I have some other in-depth videos, all jokes aside, you guys. I've done this a million times before, so if you guys want to see in-depth videos on how to assemble something, I did one on this as well. I've got 2-part series doing the short block and then the top end as well. So if you guys want to see that, I've done it. I don't even know how many videos I've made on it at this point, so quite a few. So that's pretty much it. I'm gonna wrap up this video here. On the next video, we're gonna start working on the chassis, getting that thing ready to go. I want to lift the cab off it, paint the frame, and get things cleaned up, tidied in. And then while the cab's off, then we're gonna hang the engine with the transmission. We're gonna bolt the 8-speed back to it, get that all in there, get it hung, and then the cab's gonna go back down, and then we're gonna start wiring, plumbing, and get ready to fire this thing up. So if you guys are liking this content, like I said, you guys gotta start sharing them, giving them thumbs up. These are free things that you guys can do on your end to help your boy out. But this is way too much work to do for only 1,500 or 2,000 views each episode. So you guys are gonna have to start picking up the slack on your end. So thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button, give it a like. We'll see you guys in the next one.